This video is brought to you by Adorama. To purchase new or used gear, head on over to adorama.com/fro. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a comparison between the Nikon 200 to 500 5.6 versus the Nikon 500mm PF 5.6mm prime lens. Now, we got to take both of these lenses out into the real world when we were in Florida testing out the Nikon Z6 from an airboat, shooting birds, shooting alligators, shooting elephants. There were actually no elephants because we were in a swamp. Now, of course, we don't have both of these lenses right here for you to look at, for me to wind tunnel test or for me to sniff, but let's talk about some of the features of these lenses to help you decide which one might be the right one for you. Now, a little later on in the video, we're gonna go through sample images from both of them, and remember, you can download the sample RAW files over on the website. So generally speaking, I love prime lenses. If I have time to shoot, I will break out those prime lenses because I can move around, I can zoom in with my feet because prime lenses don't zoom. They tend to be super sharp, they tend to be super contrasty and colorful, and they tend to be, well, a lot more expensive. So in this case, let's talk about the weight between both of these lenses. The 500 fixed 5.6 weighs in at 3.2 pounds, whereas the 200 to 500 weighs in at 5.1 pounds. That is so much heavier. It's almost 2 pounds heavier. Now, I personally handheld both of these lenses when I was out on the airboat shooting. If you do not have guns like this, if you're not equipped with a gun like this or a gun like this, it may be hard to handhold these lenses and shoot, and you may get a ton of shake, and you might want to use a monopod. Now, to put some things into perspective, because we don't have the lenses here right now, this is a Nikon water bottle. It's actually pretty close to the same size of both of these lenses. The 500 5.6 doesn't zoom, it's about this size, which is amazing for a 500mm lens. If you've ever seen the 500 f4, it's like $11,000. It's also massive, so the one-stop difference to get the 500 5.6 and save about $7,000 is probably worth it. The 200 to 500 when collapsed is about this size, but when you zoom it and you turn the zoom ring out, it extends much further. Ugh, this is gonna look so bad. You're gonna see all this shaking. This thing is just massive. So you need to keep that in mind, that it's not as compact as the 500mm prime lens. Another thing I want to mention about the 200 to 500 is that it takes a couple of twists to get it all the way out to 500. You know, with those smaller focal length lenses, you can just use your thumb and forefinger and basically rotate it all the way through the zoom range really easy. You gotta twist this one because it's much larger to go from 200 to 500. It's moving a lot of glass. Both of these lenses have VR, and they both work very well because I used VR because we were outside on a boat that was moving. I was most likely in sport mode. Now, the price, this is probably the most important thing to talk about because this will help you determine which lens is for you. The 500 5.6 is $3,596, whereas the 200 to 500 is $1,256. It's pretty much 3 times more expensive to get the 500 5.6 over the Zoom 200 to 500. And they're both 5.6s. Don't forget that fact right there. They also both take a 95mm filter. So if you have a circular polarizer or you put a UV filter on the ends of these lenses, you're looking at getting a 95mm filter. They're very similar in what they offer and what they do, except for the fact that one's a zoom lens and one's a prime lens. The one difference that I need to point out is that there's a memory recall button on the 500 prime lens, and you don't have a memory recall button over on the zoom lens. Personally, I haven't really used the memory recall button on any lens that I have or I've had in the past that gave me the option of having that button. It just really has never fit into my workflow. Now let's take a look at images taken with both of these lenses so you can try to determine which one is better or which one is right for you. Now let's start with the zoom 200 to 500. Now the reason I used the 200 to 500 to start when we were on the airboat is because I didn't think that a prime fixed lens at 500 would be great if a subject was closer to the boat and I couldn't shoot it with a 500mm lens. So yes, it was much heavier to hold the 200 to 500, but it gave me some versatility. For example, this shot of a blue heron just sitting there is at 380mm. Now, before I go too far, I do want to let you know that both of these lenses were using the F to Z adapter to get them on to the Z6. So keep that in mind. We're going to talk about focusing speed as I move forward, but they were both adapted. So it's a very fair comparison that we're talking about these because it was the same camera, same adapter, same situations. So I was able to pretty much fill the frame here at 380mm, and it's super sharp. Moving on to the next image, as the boat crept closer to the blue heron, it decided to fly away, and we were closer. So I was at 300mm. So no, not at 200, not all the way out at 500. I'm right in between, and I was able to get this shot. Now, this one is super far away at 500mm. There was an alligator just in the swamp, and I'm like, hey, look, it's an alligator, everybody. Let's get a picture. So at 500mm, I'm able to nail it. Couldn't fill the frame all the way because we were a little further away, but when you zoom in on the eyeball of that animal, you can see how nice and sharp it is. The colors, the tones, the clarity. So far, everything out of this lens is looking fantastic. Let me cut in here real quick and say, would you like to edit your RAW files much quicker or get a great starting point? Well, we created 14 custom Lightroom presets that you can check out at FroKnowsPhoto.com/presets. Over there, you can play with the sliders, go back and forth, see the befores and afters. And if you'd like to pick them up right now, they are currently 40% off. I actually used one of FroPack One's presets called Skittles on this image right here. Now let me set up the next scene for you. The boat was moving and a bird was flying. I ended up tracking this bird basically 360 all the way around with the continuous autofocus shooting this bird. The focus kept up with it. So you had the focus of the lens, working with the adapter, working with the body, and I pretty much didn't miss across the board shooting this. So I'm at, what am I at? 340mm on this one as the bird was taking off. But the next shot is at 310mm. So as the boat's moving, the bird's moving, either further or closer, I'm able to zoom, and this is super sharp. But the next image is the one that kind of sells me on the 200 to 500. When you zoom in on the eyeball of this bird, I was blown away by how tack sharp it was. Part of it is it's a 5.6. You're not shooting at 1.8, so you have a little more leeway there. And what am I at? I'm at 310mm with this one as well, and it is super duper sharp. It looks absolutely fantastic. So that's the thing you need to think about. Do you want to prime, where you have to move yourself, or do you want to zoom, where obviously you have range to zoom? Now for the next set of images, I switched over to the 500 prime lens because honestly I got tired of holding on to the 200 to 500 because my guns were getting, maybe I'm not as strong as I thought I was. No, I'm pretty, will you look at this? Will you just, Steven, zoom in on that. Punch in on that. That is right. Look, oh my, I got tired. Maybe I just didn't eat enough protein or something in the morning. But the next scene was pretty cool because I went with the 500, and as soon as I put it on, the prime lens, I was like, oh, that feels amazing in the hands. It's so much lighter, much easier to hand hold, that if you're a nature photographer and getting into the bush, or you're in Africa or something like that on a safari, and you don't want to take a 500 f4 because it's so massive and so heavy, this is a super nice option because it's much lighter, and it was so easy to handhold and track subjects. So this scene was interesting. We were coming up on the end of the airboat ride. Fog rolled in on us, and we were like, oh my my God, it got super foggy. It went from being awesomely clear to super foggy. And we are far away from these two birds sitting on this branch. This shot's at 500 millimeters, because again, it's a prime lens, and that's how far away I am. You can't get more reach out of the 500. You're not gonna be able to get closer until the boat gets closer. Now the boat starts to creep in closer and closer to the point where I end up going vertical. I tried to get the reflection in there, right? But I fought with the Z6 and the boat moving, and not having a vertical grip was a pain in the butt. But when you zoom in on this image, the birds look very nice and sharp. Not the greatest situation in light because of the fog, but they still look nice and sharp. And the focus on this lens is super fast and super accurate. But this last image is where everything came together. The boat was creeping in closer and closer to these birds, which again makes it more difficult when you're using a prime lens, because I can't zoom. If we got too close to the birds, they would have been out of the frame. In this case, as we crept in closer without the boat on, I believe at this point is when they turned the airboat on, and then the birds decided to fly away, and I was locked on them in continuous dynamic AF with the Z6 and snapped off a couple of pictures and got this shot. Just look when you zoom in on it. It's super nice, and it's the contrast is a little more difficult because of the situation we were in, but in other situations, this lens is going to be super beautiful. It's going to be very similar to the colors that you saw that I got earlier on that I just showed you. But this image is absolutely fantastic in my mind. You can go download the raw file and peek in on this. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to do a wind tunnel test because I don't have the lenses here, but I secretly did one out on location, and this is what it looks like. Yep, passed the wind tunnel test. Now, I know that the lighting situations were a little different in between using the 200 to 500 and the 500 prime, but it's not the quality of either of these lenses that I'm worrying about. It's the versatility and the price. The fact that it's 3 times more expensive for the fixed lens makes me question whether or not I need it, especially after seeing the quality of images that I got in the boat. The fact that I could go to 300 millimeters, 400 millimeters, 500 millimeters, it's more versatile. It's a trade-off. It's more heavy versus the prime lens. Now here's where I would maybe have a tougher decision. If the 200 to 500 wasn't a fixed 5.6 all the way through and was a 6.3 out at the end, maybe at that point I'd be like, well, yeah, the other one's a 500 prime at 5.6. Maybe I want to go with that even for the extra money. But I'm trying to think of a situation where the prime lens would be a better option, and the only thing I can think of is weight. Is if I'm traveling and I want 3 pounds instead of 5 pounds, then maybe this would be the option, but I want that zoom. So in my experience in using both of these lenses in the real world, even though the 200 to 500 is much heavier, it's more versatile and it's less expensive. So I don't see how you can go wrong going with that lens if you're trying to flip a coin and decide which one should you go with. Now, if you'd like to pick up that lens or the zoom lens, you can go to adorama.com/fro, because when you use that link, it helps us to continue to make these videos that help you make a decision on which lens is right for you. So what do you think? Which one would you go with and why? Leave your comments and questions down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And that is where I'm gonna leave it. Jared, Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.